Hello everybody. Today on this video, I'm just going to be making a quick update on a little mod I made on my bike. I mentioned in a previous video on the bike check video that I got a larger chainring in an effort to reduce the anti-squat of this bike a little bit and to reduce the pedal feedback. So I'm going to explain a little bit how this works. When you put tension on the chain, it pulls at the rear axle. So if the chain is below the main pivot, then it makes your suspension extend. But if you have a larger chain ring, let's say you have a really big one, and the chain goes above this main pivot, then when you put tension on the chain by pedaling, it actually makes your suspension compress. So by getting a slightly larger chain ring, I've effectively reduced the anti-squat of this bike by about 5 to 10%. That's usually the difference that it makes when you go up or down a size. So let's say you have a wallowy bike and you want to make it feel a little more supportive when you're pedaling up gravel roads for ages. You could just get a smaller chainring. Then you'll have better leverage to extend your suspension because your chain's going to be a lot further down from this main pivot. So why would I want a lower anti-squat in the first place? Well, first of all, the Meta TR kind of has a very high anti-squat value. I think it starts at about 130% and stays above 100% almost all the way through its travel. And then only towards the end does it go down to 90. This does make it an amazing pedaler when you're going up a gravel road for ages. But when you're going up a technical section and your suspension wants to extend over every rock and route, it kind of catches on stuff. It makes the suspension feel very firm and you lose some sensitivity there. So I wanted to reduce the anti-squat a little bit and make the rear suspension feel just a little bit more responsive so that if I'm going up a technical climb, I just don't get caught up on a bunch of stuff. And it also helps when you're going through chattery sections at slow speed in a situation where you might want to pedal through stuff. The suspension just works a little bit better. The other thing is pedal kickback. Anti-squat has a direct relation with pedal kickback. A lot of people think that it's just if you have a lot of chain growth, you're going to get pedal kickback, but that's not necessarily true. If I had, for example, a large enough chain ring for that chain to be above the main pivot there, any time that I would hit a heavy compression and get tension in the chain and get chain growth, instead of getting pedal kickback, the suspension would just compress even more. And then eventually, when it does bottom out, then maybe I'll feel something in the pedals. Alternatively, if you have a very small chain ring and you hit a sudden compression, the tension in the chain from the sudden compression is going to make your pedals move a lot further. So that's one of the reasons that I wanted to do this modification. And the other thing that it is shorter cranks also. I was going to do that anyway. I just like shorter cranks, spin smaller circles. It's easier on the knees. But basically, if you have a shorter crank, the distance that your pedals travel for a certain degree of rotation is going to be a little less. So if you get about 34 millimeters of travel of the pedals on a 10 degrees of rotation on a 175 millimeter crank, on a 165, you're probably going to get roughly about 30. It's only 4 millimeters, it's very tiny, but together with the reduction of overall pedal kickback just from a larger chainring, it's actually going to have a huge effect. And I'm going to tell you right now that it's noticeable. I definitely noticed that my ankles don't freaking hurt as much when hitting sudden compressions or, sudden surprise huck to flat drops because I took a bad line. And it definitely feels a lot better. I feel like the anti-squat was just a little too high with the 32 tooth. Of course, this is personal preference, but I'm hoping that some of you will find this information useful. Again, to summarize, if you have a sort of wallowy bike on climbs and you want to make it just a little firmer overall without having to use the lockout, you can get a smaller chainring. Alternatively, if you have a bike with high anti-squat and it resists suspension movement to a very high degree, you can get a larger chainring to reduce that slightly. Now, keep in mind that if you have one of the fancier bikes with fancier suspension that has a bunch of linkages on the bottom, you don't really have to worry about pedal kickback too much, no matter what your chainring size is, because they tune those bikes to have a curve where the anti-squat value is very, very high at the beginning, But then once you start getting past the halfway point in your travel, it starts plummeting to 0 and even negative. So that way, if you have a harsh bottom out, you're going to have little to even no pedal kickback whatsoever. But on a single pivot bike, there's no way to tune that. So if you have 130% anti-squat towards the beginning, there's just no way to make it go into the negatives towards the end of the travel. At best, you'll have it within a range of like 130 to 90, something like this. And changing the chainring size just makes it so it'll be 120% anti-squat and 80 towards deeper into the travel. So again, roughly about 5 to 10% across the board. So yep, I hope you guys found this information useful, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.